They're not going to foul. The Heat will let it play out. It's over. At last, the long wait is over. After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
All right, hello everyone. We are back on Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 20. Hard to believe I'm at 20 episodes already, but I'm your host as always, Tyler King, back talking NBA after the end of the Nuggets season, which ended last Sunday. I'm recording this on Friday, but glad I waited because a lot has happened since the Nuggets lost in pretty disheartening fashion, I guess you could say. Lost in a blowout. I don't even remember the final score at this point. Don't think anybody does or cares, but the Nuggets eliminated by the Thunder in 7 games. And we're going to break down that, the series as a whole, and just kind of everything that's happened in the last couple days here for the Nuggets and what's to come, because it should be a very interesting offseason here in Denver. And to do so, we've got our most common guest. It is my colleague at the Denver Gazette, Vinny Benedetto. Vinny, seems like your summer is now officially started now that Josh Kroenke's press conference is over. A head coach has been hired-ish or just kept around with David Adelman getting the full-time job, although there is a GM hire still to be made, although that could be internal as well, which we'll talk about. Are you excited for things to die down for you a little bit here?
Yeah, as soon as we get that GM announced, I'll be hitting the beach or Sloan's Lake. I don't know, one of the two.
All right. Well, like I said, we have to start with the Nuggets losing in Game 7 because the games have to matter still at some point, even if everybody wants to jump right to transaction season and the off season and everything that's to come over the summer. But you were there in OKC at Paycom Center. The game started out pretty interestingly with the Nuggets taking, I think, was it an 11-point lead in the first quarter. Aaron Gordon was doing way more than any of us expected. I honestly couldn't believe he played. What about you?
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when, I wasn't surprised that he was listed as questionable and that like David Adelman kept the thought that he might play alive during his pregame press conference prior to Game 7. And then I watched AG's warm-up in Oklahoma City, and it felt, it was obviously a lot lighter, but I couldn't believe that he was just like, he was jumping on his jump shots, even like a little bit. So I think they kind of like reinforced his hamstring with just a whole bunch of tape and, KT tape and sleeves or whatever they could do. I can't believe he played it at that level. It feels like borderline reckless, but I'm sure AG's the type to want to play. And if they felt like he just said he couldn't sprint. So if he knew that was the limitation and that he had to kind of play what he called an old man game and kind of like play to the point where he was protecting himself. I think really, really admirable for him to go out there and give it as much as he did. But I also think it is a little bit of an indictment on the rest of the roster that you've got to have guys risking, what probably could have been a way more significant injury.
Oh, yeah.
Just to give the team a shot in a Game 7.
Yeah, he looked like me on like the fourth game of a pickup run. It's like, all right, at this point, I don't really have much left in the tank. I'm not really getting to a full sprint. I'm knocking down open threes if they come to me. But that's about it. I'm trying to slide my feet as much as I can. But regardless, that was the more interesting thing for me was I thought, based off of the comments that David Adelman made the day before and just kind of talking to Peyton Watson, that everyone was kind of expecting AG to give it a go, maybe in warmups, and then everybody would kind of agree, this probably isn't safe, let's not risk it. But then, and the fact that it was a grade 2 strain as well. Like I initially thought maybe it was just a grade 1, because it didn't look that bad, maybe like live at the end of Game 6 on the play that it happened. He obviously was grabbing at it and didn't sound overly confident in the locker room after Game 6, but I was surprised that it was a grade 2, and that's a 6-week recovery period in a normal timeline in the regular season, off season, whatever. But then if you're playing on it and you rip it off the bone, that's like six months, and so that's kind of why I was surprised. So all props to Aaron Gordon for giving it a go, but it felt like it was trending maybe after Game 6, like if the Nuggets, this was before we really knew the extent of AG's injury, it felt like it was like, I don't know, they might have a shot in Game 7. Like I think everybody that has been around the team for as long as we have kind of felt pretty confident going in. But I think once the AG news hit, that was kind of the nail in the coffin for the season. Just at what point did you in Game 7 feel like, okay, it's probably over?
Probably early second quarter. Like to your point, they get out to that 11-point lead. In the first, I think it's 7 minutes in, it was 21-10.
Yeah.
I don't think either team scored for a couple minutes there. So yeah, the Nuggets maintained a lead, but then early second quarter, it was just like, all right, they put everything they had into that first punch, and they're just got to a point where it was pretty obvious they didn't have enough left in the tank, enough depth. I'm trying to think back to that Game 7, if there was any like one moment. It didn't feel like it was like, well, the end of the second quarter, it was a tough close to the end of the second, and then they came out and Oklahoma City kept pulling away to start the third.
There's a couple of Alex Caruso dunks. I think there was a Shea dunk in there as well, all off turnovers, by the way.
Yeah.
I think there was that third. That was I think was that at the end of the second quarter? Or was that early third quarter? The one where Jokic tried to foul grift, like almost as soon as he crossed half court, lost the ball, and then it led to, I think it was a Shea dunk. One of those ones I was like, yeah, that's probably game over right there.
Yeah, the turnovers were just a constant, and I think that you can point to that for the most part. I mean, like, turnovers were an issue for this team the entire postseason, but one of those where you can feel the 7 games. Like I think the Nuggets paid the price in Game 7 for not closing out, games 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, that was 14 games in a pretty short span with 2 Game 7s in the first 2 rounds. I have a very simple question for you here, because I've been kind of going back and forth on this, feeling both sides and kind of thinking both sides of it. Was it simply impressive that the Nuggets took OKC to a Game 7, or was Denver fortunate to be that far?
I think given the constraints that so many or a few guys in the starting lineup were playing through, I think it's pretty impressive that they got it to 7. To your point, like, the Thunder have a claim that they should have swept that series. Like,
I wasn't saying sweep, but my OKC in 5 prediction, it felt more that way with the way some of the games went. Yeah.
But for Michael Porter Jr. to be playing on one shoulder, Jamal Murray dealing with an illness, AG's hamstring obviously only really impacts Game 7, but I don't know.
Nikola Jokic's elbow apparently as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then going up against, I don't think OKC had any player other than Nikola Jokic on the injury report the entire series, and they can go like 11 deep. And if Mark Dagnall wanted, he could have gone to Kenrich Williams and gotten good minutes out of him too. So, maybe the Thunder can go like 12 or 13 deep, which is just pretty impressive in this day and age of
a luxury that most NBA teams do not have, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I was going to ask, like, my next question was going to be, what was the biggest shortcoming for the Nuggets in the series? Would you just think it was depth? That was probably just or you mentioned turnovers as well. Like, I mean, it just felt like there were times where the Nuggets were the better team in the series, and especially early in the series, it felt like if it was close, they were going to win it. The Thunder flipped the script in Games 4 and 5, and I think that was honestly the series right there. Was those games that you mentioned that as well? Nuggets feeling like they could have been up 3-1 after the 2 games in Denver, and they kind of let Game 5 slip away too as well. So was it just a combination of a couple of different things, depth, turnovers, and then losing the late game execution battle later in the series?
Yeah, I think those are all good shouts, and I think depth and turnovers you can kind of link them. If 14 games in the postseason, heavy minutes for everybody in the rotation. Beyond that, I think I would just also point to the limited options they have defensively. Like, they had to rely on a zone so heavily because I don't think they had any shot of guarding the Thunder straight up, and like, I don't think there are many NBA coaches who would prefer to utilize zone that heavy. Like, I think most of them at their core just want to be able to guard straight up and impact opposing offenses that way. But the Nuggets didn't have a shot guarding that OKC team straight up. So I think, just a little bit more defensive versatility also would have gone a long way.
One of the bigger like takeaway questions I would have had in the immediate aftermath of the series was, did David Adelman do enough to get the full-time job? And we obviously know the answer to that at this point with him. The Shams report coming out, was it 30 seconds before Josh Kroenke walked into the media room at Ball Arena yesterday, which is just kind of the way an ironic view of the way of the current media landscape is in the NBA. But I'm sure you weren't surprised by the David Adelman news. We'll shift away from the Thunder series now, and just kind of looking at Adelman as a whole. What was kind of the most impressive aspect of what he did in that interim tenure with, like I said, it was 3 regular season games and then 14 pretty intense postseason games outside of maybe 2 or 3 blowouts across the 2 series. It was some pretty intense hoops the Nuggets were a part of in those first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing to me was, I kind of like touched on it, just the different looks they use defensively. Like, there isn't a ton of time to practice. I remember it was one day, can't remember if it was late Clipper series or early Thunder series. They were talking about, I think early Thunder series, they were talking about how they just kind of like installed a new look or a new tweak to their zone, like in a walkthrough that day. So I think just his ability to kind of incorporate those things on the fly, those are things like the Nuggets mixed in. Like, Michael Malone would throw a junk defense out there, on a side out of bounds play with 12 seconds left in the quarter, just to, junk up an opposing offense or give them a look they weren't expecting. But like, by the end of that Thunder series, like, Oklahoma City had to know they were going to face just a wide variety of zone defenses. And I mean, it wasn't perfect. Like, there were certainly games where, Caruso or Dort hit threes, and like, those just break your zone pretty quickly. But I think just the willingness to try different stuff, to do kind of whatever it takes to give his team a shot, I think was pretty impressive for a guy who's, in his first real opportunity like that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was like, he obviously did things differently than Michael Malone. I think the amount that Julian Strawther played in Game 6 was something that you might not have seen from a Michael Malone from at this point of Michael Malone's tenure. And that obviously saved the series at that point, won them that game. Playing Julian like 19 minutes, he played whatever it was. He had what, 15 points, I think it was, whatever he had. It was just became the Julian Strawther game, in a way. And I don't know if Michael Malone does that. Are there anything, whether it's schematically or the way he's going to utilize rotations in the regular season, because this was such a unique scenario. Like, he played Jalen Pickett in one, I think was the Sacramento game, where that was one where he closed. Like, you saw him willing to try things. Is that something you expect maybe a little bit more of as when he takes over as the full-time, really in October, when that comes around?
Yeah, I think the way he managed rotations should have gotten guys' attention, in the final 3 games of the regular season. And even the postseason, the willingness to go to a Julian Strawther who had only been used, at the end of blowouts previously. And yeah, like, Julian has his own defensive shortcomings, but I think DA saw what the team needed in that instance and wasn't afraid to try it. And I think one thing that stuck out that David said early, I think it was after his first home game, which was second to last game of the regular season, Memphis, I believe. He said no one in the locker room is getting star treatment other than number 15. And so I think that is a little change from, the previous years I covered the team where there were, a few more guys getting star treatment. Now I think it's like, Joker can take a defensive possession off or not get back, or, do some star things and get away with it. But I think the leash on some of the other guys is going to be a lot shorter.
Last thing before we get to the offseason as a whole, and I want to spend some time on Josh Kroenke's press conference from yesterday. Are there any, like, how different do you think the assistant coaching staff could look next year? I know, like, Ryan Saunders, I think all those guys, their contracts were expiring at the end of this season, so none of them or all of them could be back. Like, you got Ryan Saunders, Ryan Bowen, Popeye Jones are probably the most notable guys that were still left on the assistant bench. I mean, David Adelman's spot in his old spot is probably going to be one that needs to be filled. Like, what are you expecting from maybe previous relationships that DA has, or guys he might try to bring in? Or do you feel like those 3 guys that I mentioned will probably be the majority, or will be back as the main assistants?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mix. I think there's going to be some retention, but I do think David also needs to go out and bring in some fresh ideas or some fresh voices, just because, if we're at a point where they're just almost completely running it back, it doesn't feel like that's necessarily enough, in terms of if you want to give this team a legitimate belief that they're a championship contender. And I think we'll get to this later, but like from the roster construction, like a lot of it is pretty set. Like they have limited ways to change things up. And so I think the coaching staff, I think there are probably some guys that should be kept around and some guys that, might be best served elsewhere, or the Nuggets might be best served bringing in a new voice. So I would expect a mix of retention and some new faces joining the staff.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to see David bring in someone like his own version of who Nate McMillan, who JJ Redick brought in last year, or Jeff Van Gundy, that Ty Lue had on his staff last year, as like the lead assistant who has head coaching experience, maybe is good at one particular thing offensively or defensively, because it seems like DA is at least pretty malleable in kind of going back and forth between offense and defense. He did both during his time as an assistant, and I think he handled both sides of the ball well as in the head coaching role as well. So that'll be interesting to see if there's like an established veteran that comes along. That'll be interesting. So maybe I don't know. Nobody really sticks out to me right now, other than maybe like Mike Brown or somebody like that. I'm just thinking of.
I was going to say Mike Budenholzer, but just
yeah, definitely one of those guys could definitely be an interesting guy to be like the lead assistant on the bench. But now I want to transition into Josh Kroenke's press conference from yesterday afternoon. Obviously, like he led with the David Adelman stuff because that broke right before he walked in the room. But what was any other big takeaway you had from what Josh said ahead of what is surely going to be a very interesting offseason for him and everybody else in the front office?
Yeah, and I think, after the head coaching thing was announced, like a lot of attention shifted to the general manager, and like it is kind of like a different sort of order of operations.
Yeah, it's usually the other way around. Yeah.
So I think that will be interesting to follow. And, Josh was asked what he's looking for in a general manager, and he kind of, I wouldn't say he answered it straight on. It was more of like, there's so many things that go into being a general manager, and you're looking for the right combination. But I think finding that combination gets trickier when you have the head coach in place. So I'm wondering if that, it probably rules out some certain some candidates who wanted to come in and have complete say over the thing. But Josh apparently, or DA, did enough to win Josh over and kind of have him do things in a reverse order. So I wouldn't be surprised if the general manager hire takes, a little bit longer, just because it is going to be, a lot trickier than saying, all right, you're in control, go find a head coach. So I think just the way they're crossing things off the to-do list is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and the way we're doing it in a backwards way, in a sense, also kind of leads you maybe more to the idea that there could actually be an internal candidate that they're looking at, whether it's Ben Tenzer, who is obviously the interim, Tommy Balcetis, yeah, who's also in the mix as well. I mean, do you feel like after yesterday there is more of a chance that one of those guys gets promoted from within?
It feels like that's a real possibility. And
I know it has been the norm with the organization. Like it was with Alvin. Yeah, it was with Tim as well. Like it's kind of been the norm, but this feels like a little different situation.
Yeah, it feels like it should be a different situation. But it's just one of those things, like historically, the Kroenkes haven't been crazy about, paying the executives, top dollar or bringing in big names. It feels they've been pretty comfortable promoting from within. But feels to me like this should be a different situation. Yes. Nikola Jokic turned 30 in February. This thing isn't going to go on forever. And I think at some point you've got to kind of go all in on maximizing what is left of this thing. And this feels like it would be a good summer to do that. I don't know what kind of message that sends to the general public if you have the opportunity to start over with a general manager and new coach, and you decide to promote both from within. I think that's, interesting kind of messaging. And it feels like a big gamble because, if this doesn't go well for Josh Kroenke, the head coaching hire or the next GM. Like it feels like public pressure is going to be ramped up quite a bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does he feel like he has more pressure to get more involved with day-to-day basketball ops? Like, I mean, obviously, he is a basketball guy. He cares about this a lot. But I think it's been pretty clear the last couple of years that he's wanted to let the GM and the coach kind of do their own jobs. He'll probably stay that way with DA at least. But with the new GM, whether it is an internal hire or somebody new, does it feel like maybe he wants to be more involved with that? Or do you still feel like he wants to have the same philosophy of kind of letting the guys in their positions do their jobs?
Yeah, one thing he said was, about the last time there was this period of transition when Tim left for Minnesota and they promoted Calvin.
Yeah.
One thing Josh said is he felt like he needed to be more hands-on during the transition period, during the onboarding process or whatever it is. So I would expect him to be a little more engaged, early on, and then probably as time warrants or as people get more comfortable in their roles, I would expect him to kind of scale back to what he's been in recent years and let those guys do their job. But I would expect him to be pretty involved in the early stages of this thing.
I mentioned Tenzer and Balchetis as internal candidates. Are there any external candidates that have caught your eye at this point? I know Bob Myers has been brought up a lot, but that, like you said, the Kroenkes, that's not really their kind of hire in terms of an executive, because he would not come cheap. He'll probably stick around on ESPN through the finals. Like if that you want to wait that long, is there anybody else that's kind of jumped out to you if you're looking at other organizations or former executives that have, if not, that's fine too. I was just curious if anybody has kind of jumped out to you as you're looking at potential candidates here.
Yeah, no one has really jumped out. One thing, Josh mentioned was the potential of using a search firm to come up with a list of, bright up and coming minds.
Yeah.
And that kind of feels like it fits the Kroenkes MO when it comes to hiring these things. And so I guess not to exclude people, but it does feel like, it feels unlikely there's going to be this established general manager that people are,
a brand name kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be very surprised if that's the case. So, I would be shocked if Bob Myers is the guy. Not to mention, he's hanging out with Michael Malone these days on ESPN. And, if Bob wanted an opinion on what working for the Kroenkes is like, I don't know what Michael Malone would say, but
he's probably got an opinion.
I'm sure it would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms we don't have to get into on this podcast. The whole Malone's first couple days on ESPN. I actually kind of enjoyed him a little bit, some of his comments, but I'm not a Nuggets fan, so I'm sure that's got to be a little bit weird for fans, and even for somebody like you that was around him for every day for a couple of years. But jumping into the offseason, because I do agree with you, I think it should be a fresh mind, because while, as we'll get into, there aren't a ton of ways to fix the roster and change things up and get a fresh perspective with no ties to really anybody on the roster, I think would be good in a situation like this, where it's like we have limited options, but there still are options. It's not going to be I don't think it's going to be a total run it back situation, despite the roster being pretty set. You did a story in the Denver Gazette earlier this week, just kind of looking at everybody on the roster and their situation. It feels like 10, 11, maybe 12 guys are probably set already at this point, depending on some options. How many roster spots do you feel like are going to be filled? And obviously it's all going to be minimum guys or undrafted free agents, whatever if they go that route as well. What's the first thing you feel like would be on the to-do list, as far as not just adding guys to the roster, but there's trade candidates as well? I mean, how would you approach this if you were the GM?
Yeah, I mean, so they've got 11 guys under contract for next season, 2 more with player options, Dario and Russ. And so I think
those guys got player options, by the way. That's just crazy, especially Dario.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to pick that one up.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a giant market out there for him.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, if he wants to go play in Europe, if he would be happier there, he could still pick up his player option and request to be bought out or something. I mean, I just don't think he's getting $5 million a year in Europe.
Probably not.
I mean, so beyond that, I'd make a call to Bruce Brown. it's weird. He keeps like teasing Nuggets fans with.
He was at. Was that one of the Clippers games he was at? Was that game 1 or 2 he was at? Was that game 1? I think
he was at one of the Clippers games. He posted when the Nuggets graphic announcing David Adelman as the next head coach. I think he posted that to his Instagram. He's wearing a Colorado Avalanche hat on social media. So like, what the salary, if he went out and made his money and is cool to come back on a, friendly deal to chase another championship and, further his status as a Colorado cult hero. Like,
yeah,
I mean, like that.
That's what you're talking. That's what the Nuggets are looking at, like guys that are interested in doing that on like a vet minimum, because they don't even. I don't know if they even have any of the like
exceptions.
the tax mid level or any of the biannual exception, all that kind of stuff. I think Dario on the biannual exception, or is that the tax mid level?
Taxpayer mid level.
That would because it was Reggie Jackson. Then they had to trade 3 second-round picks to get off of it, and then they gave it to Dario, who was probably worse than Reggie Jackson. But regardless, I mean. There's also the trade options as well. I mean, Mike is going to be the obvious guy. I mean, just is there a team that you feel like could value him even remotely close to what the Nuggets do, or it's just a really interesting conversation when it comes to Mike, and not even getting into like Jamal as well, which I think that's really unrealistic at this point. I think that would be have to come after next season, after another season of maybe some disappointment. But the Zeke Naji contract still exists. Like there's still some of the young guys maybe that you could attach to in certain deals. I mean, just how would you even approach looking at that trade deals at this point? Because it is so complicated for the Nuggets, who aren't in the second apron, which they would have been if they had brought back KCP last year. But right. There's still not a lot of wiggle room and not a lot of teams to deal with, even ones that might be interested in Mike.
Yeah, and I think the tough thing with Mike is, I don't know how many, but I would bet at least a third of the teams, or maybe even half of the teams in the NBA, would look at his medicals and just be like,
"Yeah, there's that part too." Yeah,
you know what, not worth the risk for us. Yeah. And then especially at that salary point. So I think it is going to be pretty tough to thread that needle. Like obviously, teams can always use shooting. Like there are going to be teams who are looking for additional spacing. But, I think teams will probably also be curious to know how bad that shoulder injury is. Like, I just think it's going to be tricky to trade Mike. I think it's certainly easier to trade Mike than Jamal. Like, that extension kicks in next year.
Yeah, weirdly, Mike's contract is easier to trade because it's only 2 years left, and Jamal's got 4 heading in 4 years left after this past season. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty crazy in that regard.
The salary jumps up to, 45, 46 next year?
Yeah,
Jamal?
Then it's up to 48, and then it gets up toward, is it like 56? I think at the end of that contract. Yeah, it's in 28, 29. I think it's like 56 or 57 million, which is just insane. But I mean, yeah.
So if you're the Nuggets and want to get off of Jamal, to your point, I think if you really want to move off Jamal, I think you kind of got to give him a year and hope he plays better, because I think right now the contract value is a negative, and it's hard to.
Orlando has always come up to me in that regard because they're so starved for guard scoring and scoring in general. And if it's like Jalen Suggs, Jonathan Isaac, and that's it, like maybe that is like no picks involved on either side, and you're just kind of giving Jamal for like 2 or 3 members of the Magic, like 2 contracts and one of their younger guys that they don't really play, whether it's like Caleb Houston or Tristan Da Silva even, or I'm trying to think Jace Howard, one of those guys, throwing them in alongside Suggs and like John Isaac. That would be interesting to me, but I don't know if the Magic even do that. Like that's like, I mean, there's plenty of deals you could probably come up with, but that one's always jumped out to me. But I still think, I said this last year, but it's probably like give Jamal another year to see if he can turn it around, and then revisit it after next season. Because I mean, we've talked about the extension many times, and just kind of you kind of had to give him the contract, but it also does not. The second you signed it, it doesn't feel great. I mean, even when you're signing it, it doesn't feel great. But just before we wrap up here, because I know you got stuff to do, I'm going to get you out of here. And we'll have plenty of time throughout the offseason to talk about whatever comes next for the Nuggets. Is the most important thing that happens over the next few months is just how Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, maybe Hunter Tyson if you include him in that group, how those guys develop over the summer as they try to become more valued pieces, maybe not just the Nuggets, but to the league as a whole in terms of being rotation guys, whether it's here in Denver or somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly the easiest path forward for the Nuggets to get back to, one of the upper echelon teams in the West or in the NBA as a whole. And like Peyton is the one for me where it's just like, I would circle that name like 3 times when it comes to guys you're looking, or guys who can really, with a summer of development and training, like I think
he's getting toward the end of his rookie deal too. Like it's kind of put up or shut up time for him as well. Because obviously Christian Brown's going to get paid at some point, which also is going to factor into the offseason as well. I didn't even mention that, but I mean, I heard the $30 million a year rumor. Now I don't know if that's a lot, but I mean, I think I said to you when we were talking kind of in private at some of these games, like I would be surprised if it's not at least 20 million. I could see it getting up to 25 a year. But even then, that's going to be a delicate negotiation in terms of getting him on a fair-ish deal that also works for him. Because I mean, on the open market, he's a guy that probably would get that 30 million, if to be honest.
Yeah, they better hope he likes being in Denver and playing alongside Nikola Jokic, because he's there. There is the flip side of like, oh no, you got too good too quickly. Like,
yeah.
Especially for a team in the Nuggets financial situation. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. I wouldn't be stoked to hand CB 30 a year. Somewhere 20, 25 range, you probably got to do it. But it's also
like 4 for 88 would be great if you're the Nuggets. Like something like that would be ideal. But I mean, still. And then, like I said, getting back to the Peyton Watson thing, because I agree with you that he is probably the most interesting young guy. I would probably lump Strawther in as well, just because if he can become an all passable defensively, we've seen what he can do off the bench as a heat check kind of guy and just bring in some instant offense. But Peyton as well. I mean, like I said, it's put up or shut up time at the end of a rookie deal. Like he's trying to get a second contract. And I think this is the season where he's got to prove it. And this summer is going to be huge for that.
Yeah. And it's like, Peyton and Julian, if they just played one-on-one all summer and like,
can both of you can you teach each other how to do better, be better at the thing you're really good at? And it's like, we can combine you into one player, but also then multiply you. That would be the ideal scenario somehow.
I don't think it like is works that way, or is that easy to pull off? Otherwise, I think I'd be a player development coach or something. But yeah, it is just kind of like what Peyton does really well is what Julian needs to improve at, and vice versa. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Julian can be a microwave scorer off the bench, but it's just like, can you play without fouling? Can you be, like you said, passable defensively? And Peyton, I think it's, he had games where there was one in Oklahoma City, I think final matchup of the regular season. AG didn't play, and Peyton, I think, went 4 for 4 on corner threes. And was just like, there were glimpses of when you get the complete package from Peyton Watson. And I think that is a player who could be incredibly helpful to this Nuggets team in the next few years.
Yeah, just have him take 1 million corner threes this summer would be my thing, and just show him 1 million back screens on film, and just how to, like Christian Brown has done, just kind of that kind of mold, and how to be effective in the dunker spot is another thing he could really benefit from. But all right, Vinny, that's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you coming on. Sure we'll have you back on as the offseason gets closer. I mean, unfortunately, I can't have you on to talk draft stuff because the Nuggets do not have a draft pick, as I failed to mention earlier. So, or I think I mentioned that earlier. They don't have a draft pick, so it'll be undrafted or two-way guys if they try to bring in some new young guys. So, appreciate you coming on, and hope you get at least a couple days here to relax as after another longish playoff run.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, that'll do it from today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Thanks again to Vinny for coming on. After the end of the Nuggets season, off season already underway with David Adelman being hired, as we talked about, going to be an interesting summer here in Denver. That's for sure. I think running it back with DA as a coach, I think was wise. We'll see about the GM. I gave my thoughts on that, and I think the roster could look a little different by the time the season comes around in October. And we'll be here on this podcast to cover all of that and everything else that's going on here in the Mountain Time Zone with I'll going to be diving pretty deep into draft stuff over the next couple weeks with the Jazz at number 5. Suns also in the back at the end of the first round. We'll be digging into both those teams and kind of what their off seasons could look like. We had Ben Anderson on from KSL last week to preview the Jazz off season a little bit after the disappointment in the lottery, but still, a lot to come. I think we'll do a big board on this show, and then we'll dive into all the college stuff as well. Hoping to get some pretty fun guests on for the college game over the next couple of weeks as we get really into the summer here. As starting to slow down a little bit, but especially with all the teams now in the time zone eliminated, but should be a fun couple weeks here with the conference finals going on, the NBA finals. It's been fun so far. I've enjoyed it. So thanks everybody for listening, watching, wherever you're doing that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, rate, review, comment as well. All that is really appreciated by me. So thanks to Vinny again for coming on today, and thanks for everybody at home for watching, and enjoy the weekend of basketball.